Your self-talk is the only voice you hear 24/7. And most days, it's not that kind. For many golfers and entrepreneurs, the inner dialogue quietly runs the show. It talks you out of what you know you should be doing, guilty. It keeps you glued to comfort, also guilty. And it convinces you you're not ready, not worthy, or not capable of next level success. What's up, fellow golfer? Welcome back to another episode of the Scratch Golfer's Mindset podcast. I'm your host, the golf hypnotherapist, Paul Salter. I'm a mindset and performance coach who specializes in helping his clients get unstuck, out of their own way, so they can unlock and achieve their potential. And today I'm joined by a good friend and fellow mindset coach, Mr. Trevor Tellin, who's here for a phenomenal conversation to unpack how your inner voice shapes your identity, your confidence, and your results, both on and off the course. And stay tuned to the end because I get an opportunity to begin to really pick Trevor's brain on this new passion project he's been working on for a long time, finally bringing to life in early 2026, called Inner Loop. Definitely got to check it out. It's an incredibly creative tool and piece of technology he's developing to better augment and learn how your current self-talk is or isn't supporting you and your goals. Trevor is a high-performance mindset coach who helps golfers master the mental side of the game so they can perform with confidence, composure, and clarity under pressure. Founder of Mindset Coach Trev, he works with competitive amateurs, college players, and professionals to help them overcome fear, perfectionism, and self-doubt, both on and off the course. Trevor has a master's degree in psychology and years of experience coaching athletes, leaders, and business professionals. He combines sports psychology, neuroscience, and practical mindset tools to help clients unlock their full potential while also gaining greater freedom and fulfillment. Buckle up, get your note-taking device ready, and please help me welcome Trevor to the show. Trevor, every day, 24/7, every minute of the day, we are talking to ourselves. There's this voice, it's just nonstop vomiting words, thoughts, sentences. Why do so many people fall victim to their inner dialogue and self-talk?
Well, wonderful question. What comes up instantly, kind of immediately for me is a lack of awareness, perhaps, first and foremost, right? If we don't even pick it up, then do we really even know that it's running the show? Probably not. But then secondly, because we certainly have, many opportunities in life to build that awareness up. I mean, I don't know if anybody's more convincing than ourselves, frankly. I know I can talk myself into just about anything. So when it's coming from a voice that feels so familiar, it's hard to separate from that sometimes. At least I've personally found. I don't know. And those two reasons feel pretty paramount in that mix.
Yeah, I love that second answer in particular. Like, it's so convincing. We find such an easy time justifying or rationalizing why we engage in the sabotaging behavior that we know is going to push us 3 steps back. Why do you think it is so easy to convince ourselves out of what at least some part of us knows is good for us and needed to get to the next level?
Well, there's always, as I hear you lay that out, I mean, what comes up almost instantly, it's like, well, there's always a sacrifice is maybe not quite the right word, but it's always an exchange. Like, you're not going to be able to get those things or lean into those things that we know are good for us, probably without giving up a little bit of something as well, right? There's only so much time in the day, only so much room on the plate. So are we always ready to give some of those things up? I mean, depends on what it is, depends on who we are. But not always. When we think about kind of model of change and the process people go through, sometimes it takes a little while to even really register that, what, this is more important than this now in my life, and I'm ready and willing to kind of step into that fully. So, no, how we assign value, I think, is pretty important there.
Expand on that more. Assign value to what? The reward or what we gain versus what we lose in our decision making?
Yeah, I think both are probably relevant. I think reward is probably maybe the first that kind of registers quickly, right? The reward of, well, now that I say that, maybe it's even a little bit of both. Because if I'm thinking, well, the reward of me sitting on the couch here watching another episode is comfortable, it's casual, I'm laid back, I'm at ease. This isn't hard work.
Yeah.
That's a great reward. But then we contrast that with getting up right now and heading to the gym or heading to the range or whatever it may be. Um, there's maybe a little discomfort in that. And when there's discomfort on one side and great comfort on the other, it's pretty dang easy to just slide back into that comfort side of things.
So then what I'm hearing is it's important to maybe slow down and develop a practice of checking in. What is we can go numerically, if you will, assigned reward value from remaining on the couch versus getting to the range, which could potentially help lessen the perceived feeling of discomfort or resistance we're feeling to go do what we know we should be doing?
I would agree with that. I 100% think so. I mean, if we can have the mindfulness to pause for a second and say, okay, wait a minute, what is this debate I'm really in the midst of right here? And if we can kind of contrast one point or one perspective against the other, typically I feel like with a round or two there, we come to a little more clarity and say, okay, yes, this may be true. This is comfortable, but boy, that's what really matters to me. So I think I'm going ahead. I'm going to make the exception, at least for today, and get to it.
It's interesting. When I was primarily doing my significant sustainable weight loss coaching, I used to talk a lot about, there's the whole, I hate this concept, cheat meals in the weight loss fitness industry. And I don't like any part of the connotation of cheating. I would describe them as free meals. And when I would talk about kind of these aligned actions of learning to enjoy yourself, to be selective in your indulgences, the way I would frame it kind of comes back to that reward scale. I would tell my clients, 0 to 10, if it's a 9 or higher, it's grandma's pumpkin pie. She makes just this once time of year. It's that fucking good. You absolutely have. I don't care if you're dieting or not. It's nostalgic. It's delicious. But if Betty's bringing cookies to the office every Friday and then the same half-cooked chocolate chip cookies, you should probably pass on that because they're like a 1 out of 10 on that desired reward scale. So I find it fascinating that we can use the numbers in our advantage here. And then as you alluded to, it becomes a conversation with ourselves. It's almost like we can picture two parts of ourselves rationalizing the part of us that wants the best, the part of us that doesn't. How do we begin to win more of those conversations or let the voice of our future self really shine loudly?
Oh, that's what a great question. For one, again, I think awareness is there, but I think that's almost that's a given, right? Of course, that's a prerequisite. We got to be aware that there's, perhaps more than one voice in the room. But secondly, I actually work on this with a variety of folks, sometimes in the athletic setting, but especially even outside of that, kind of the business sector and such, is personifying some of those voices. So let's actually build a little bit more of a character around them. Let's give them a little more of a presence. Let's give them something a little more real. So it's not just this one squeaky thought that is maybe kind of coming in and we're not sure why it's there. But maybe if we actually put a little body to that, we realize that voice represents aspirations, big goals, big values, whatever the heck it may be. But it actually deserves a little, seat at the table and a little more respect maybe when those conversations are going on.
Walk us through an example, even if it's, kind of a compilation of your clients. Like, what does the personifying of this voice sound like, look like? What is that process?
Yeah. I honestly think it's a space to bring a lot of creativity in, because how I might personify is going to be completely different than how you might, for that voice in a sense. So I think it can be playful. It can be fun. Let's give this voice a name, right? Like, who are they? I've run through this exercise before and people will say, oh, that's the judge for sure. Or one time somebody named him like Patricia. And it's like, okay, fine. Whatever Patricia is to you is what this is. We can talk through characteristics of this voice. So how do they typically communicate their message? Are they stern? Are they direct? Are they curious? Are they compassionate? Are they cutthroat? What might it be? Just adding the layers and the different pieces. I just think the more that comes through, then the more we have something real to work with in a sense. And, maybe it becomes a more important voice when we understand what's really there.
And what's the benefit as we start kind of bringing to life this part of us, this voice of us? We start recognizing, I've done this candidly. So like a part of me that shows up that I don't like is I call him passive Paul, and it's a turtle. It's slow. It's counterproductive. And how do you help your clients begin to use that in their favor, to their advantage, once they are able to create it as a separate part?
Hmm. It feels two-part to some degree.
Yeah.
It feels like you really got to get good with that noticing muscle, right?
Hmm.
Noticing when that's a call or whoever it is starts to show up. Because I
Yeah.
mean, if we catch it 5 minutes after, that's great. At least we've gotten it. But maybe it's already made its mark. It's already influenced the decision. But if we could pick that up quicker and sooner, well, then
Hmm.
okay, we know it's there. We can take a step back and pause. And then I think it really comes back to, just briefly even reconnecting. Okay, is this voice relevant here? Is this voice respected here? Does this voice really even know what it's talking about in this situation? We got to kind of relate it to, the moment we're experiencing,
Hmm.
understanding, is this worth anything in this moment or not? And if they are, great, let's go for it. And then let's reflect afterwards and understand, even trusting that more, listening to it more, how are things working? And it seems the more things work, the more willing people are to use them, do them, etc. So I think just a repetition, really.
I believe you alluded to it. Do you also help your clients personify the positive voices, the ones that are having their best interest in mind, the most aspirational version of them as well, just like you do some of the so-called negative or limiting voices?
I think that's massively important, right? I
Mm,
mean, we don't want one voice or one just even side of the line to kind of dominate the whole conversation. Why
yeah.
not? The more the merrier, perhaps even, right? If we got a good grasp on the variety of voices and thought processes or kind of angles that pop up, I
Yeah.
think we can do a lot of good with that once we know.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's such a underappreciated aspect of this type of work, is we're so quick to always label the negative, find the negative, without ever really
Mm.
giving enough time and attention to the many positive aspirations, the ambition, the tenacity, the part of you that's pushing and driving you forward. Sure, it can be destructive, but it can be incredibly powerful and positive as well.
Absolutely. I mean, on both sides of it, it's really just about giving up some boundaries, some guardrails, right? The
Mm.
negative voice can sometimes be helpful too, right? Keeps us out of danger, etc. But we don't want it to run the show. And equally as much, we probably don't want that blindly optimistic voice to run the show either, because that could get us into some bad situations.
Yeah, one of the analogies I love, and I do this a lot, and it's so applicable to the voices, but when I do like parts or emotions type work, it's like I'll use anger as a common example. Everyone labels anger as bad, evil, destructive. It's just a neutral emotion. It's just determined by how
Mm,
you label it. And if you're going to let anger hijack the steering wheel of your decisions and actions, that is
yeah,
potentially catastrophic. However, anger is allowed to hang out in the passenger seat, the back seat.
yeah,
At times, you might need
yeah,
to put it in the trunk or kick it out altogether, but it's
sure,
maintaining a
sure.
semblance of both awareness and control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how like freeing, right? As you're saying that, I'm
Yeah.
like, man, if I don't feel the urge that I gotta kick anger out all the time, like it's this terrible thing that, oh goodness, what's this mean about me if I'm showing it?
Ooh.
Man, there's a lot of freedom in that. There's room to
Yeah.
move and breathe, and all of a sudden it doesn't feel like my back's up against the wall. So yeah,
Yeah.
I love what you're saying there. Absolutely.
Great point. So talk us through this. I come to you and I'm like, Trevor, I have just got the harshest inner critic. I am so unkind. I'm an asshole to myself. I would never
Hmm.
talk to anybody else the way I speak to myself. Help me. Where do we begin?
Oh, great question. Um, the first thing, since we clearly know this particular voice or kind of theme of conversation, I'd say we want to unpack that a little bit. Like, is it always bad? To our point earlier, is
Mm.
it actually helpful at times? Like, what's the full story there? What percentage of that, what portion of that do we want to change?
Yeah.
What are maybe some of the other perspectives or angles we think might be helpful? Let's just like lay out the foundation, understand
Mm.
all the ingredients that are really there, and from that point, then let's start being a little more intentional with it, right? Let's say before I show up today's round or today's practice or whatever the event may be, I want to be very purposeful with not letting
Mm.
this one sole perspective angle run the show. I want to bring other pieces into the mix, and again, just kind of learn from those experiences, evolve from them, tweak along the way. And step by step, it obviously takes time because most of these voices are pretty programmed. We've been wrapped up by the same kind of internal stories for a long
Yeah.
time. But with time, the grasp kind of loosens a bit. And again, we have a little more room to move, I'd say.
What's a practice look like in terms of starting to consistently bring more awareness to ultimately create opportunity for positive change in how we speak to ourselves?
Mm-hmm. I think you could look at this two ways. I think from one angle, right, we could go, ancient practices, right? Meditation, mindfulness. I mean, this to me, this is so much about what these are about, right? Just
Yeah.
becoming aware of what is arising, when it comes up, where it comes up, the intensity that it shows up, etc. And we could build awareness that way. Takes a little bit longer, I'd say,
Yeah.
but it is a really solid practice, right? That shows up in all areas of life, and frankly, I fully believe is incredibly beneficial. If we wanted to look at that in a perhaps more modern way, I think now with the technologies and such that are coming about, I mean, we can use a lot of different tools. There's one that I see blast my Instagram. It's not necessarily for sports per se, but there's this voice recorder out there I see called Plod, and it's used in a business setting. And it
Okay.
basically just records your conversation all day and gives you this nice little AI summary at the end of it. Okay, here's a way I don't even need to worry about thinking about what did I say today? How'd that come up? Et cetera, et cetera. Here's a nice summary of that. As we've briefly noted on, this is the whole point of Interloop. The project I'm currently working on is, can we use technology? Can we use a little bit of AI to capture, record, and get a cleaner data-backed picture of what actually is coming through? And I personally find when we can put some data to that, when we can kind of put some separation between ourselves and this occurrence or these words or thought processes, whatever it is, they're a little bit easier to work with. They don't feel quite as personal now. They're real. They're a little more tangible. They're visible.
Yeah.
And I think with either of those routes, we can start to find a nice path for ourselves and just frankly figure out what works. What is the right combo or ratio of these different voices, different perspectives, etc.
Yeah. And the underlying theme here, like you alluded to with the personification and then inner loop examples, and we're going to dive into that more in a moment, is creating space, distance. I am not that voice. That voice is not me. It's one of many voices or parts of me. And again, like you said so well, when we create that space, suddenly it's not so personal. It's not so emotionally charged. Now we can see it as tangible, malleable, perhaps most importantly.
Oh, great.
And that gives us the chance, the space, and opportunity to do the work necessary to make the upgrade. Tell us, what exactly is Interloop? How does it work? What is the primary purpose?
Yes, indeed. The primary purpose, if we start there, is to really help golfers, and for now it's focused on golfers, become aware of what they're saying on the course, as straightforward as it can be. What I've found through my time in sport and performance psychology is that when I would sit and chat with an athlete and I'd ask them, how'd this last tournament go, this last round go, we'd get a nice breakdown. But then if I went and actually watched that player play in real life, I was standing there on the, outside the ropes. Boy, I got like a whole different story, right? Now I'm seeing the genuine reactions. I'm hearing some of the chirping that's going on. And I found it fascinating that those things didn't always make it into our session. As I thought about that a little bit further, it's like, well, okay, of course. Like, as we're talking about earlier, we don't always notice those things. They're almost always so automatic or so programmed that they just kind of happen. And even if we do remember them, by the time we talk a few days later, we perhaps have forgotten. So the idea is a golfer, actually I have one right here beside me, a golfer can clip on a little microphone. I mean, it's incredibly small. It's incredibly light, right on the side of their hat or wherever is most comfortable. They hit record. They go play. When they're done, they hit stop recording. They upload that file into the Interloop app. And within minutes, they get a full breakdown, putting real data to these, to this self-talk. So a clear picture of, out of all the words we said to ourselves, taking context into consideration, how positive were we? How negative were we? How neutral were we? How instructional were we? What phrases, what words do we say most often? That one personally is always quite enlightening. There's an opportunity to see the trend. So how do these things change throughout the 18 holes? Do we see that consistently? Man, when I make that turn and I get to the back nine, my negativity always increases. It just gives us opportunities to understand maybe what's really going on to some degree. And it's a great springboard for further discussion, exploration, and then put some tools into the mix.
Now, are users instructed to just almost verbalize all of their self-talk to the best of their ability beforehand?
Excellent question. Yes and no. I'll
Okay.
put it that way. I mean, that is by far the way you get the most out of it. The more you talk, the better. Now, I understand for a lot of folks, no, that's maybe not as natural.
Hmm.
I've played with folks before where it's like, I don't know if they said more than 4 words, out of 4 hours.
Yeah.
So, with that in mind, within the kind of training system as well, there's an education course. It's 4 weeks long, and it actually starts to teach players how they can use their self talk in a variety of situations. So, we start
Okay.
with baseline awareness. What is self talk? And then we start bringing attention to certain
Mm.
areas where we can bring it into the mix. So, there's a little bit of guidance there as well. So, for the folks that maybe don't talk at all or just talk endlessly in every direction, we can start to bring a little structure, have a little context or a little container, and then it's a
Yeah.
little bit easier to actually understand some of that data.
So for those of you who are listening and are like me, big fans of The Office, you couldn't see the picture of the little Bluetooth speaker Trevor had, but it reminds me of that episode of The Office with Jim and Pam working apart, and they have the world's smallest Bluetooth speaker, and they're in two different offices, and they just talk to each other all day.
Exactly.
Now,
Classic.
I know. What is the education opportunity? What does that support look like? I'm using Inner Loop. I'm gaining more understanding and awareness. I have these terrible patterns of being harsh, critical, and judgmental and berating myself.
Yeah.
Now I'm aware. Is there frameworks and reframes kind of within the education to make improvements?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
So the first, you could say 50% or so of the education focuses on just bringing the awareness to our own situation, right? What are the words we say? When do we say them? And then taking that a step further, what impact do they have? When I see my negativity spike, how do I feel that in the body? And if we really start to think through it, how might that, tension in the body, if that's what it is, how might that translate to my game, to my technical side, my swing? Just so we can start to see this full picture. Once we paint that, though, exactly to your point, we focus the second half, if you will, on some actual frameworks. We spend one full week on the idea of neutral thinking, a concept that I learned from Trevor Moawad when I had the chance to intern with him a few years back, and really emphasizing there that, okay, maybe we are very negative, and maybe subtracting all that negativity is going to be pretty hard to do. So let's not put ourselves in that box. Let's just start to learn how we can create a little more balance, a little more evenness between maybe the negative, maybe the positive, maybe the instructional. I find just a little bit of an easier way to kind of work ourselves into some change there. From that point, in perhaps the final 25%, you could say, we focus on the pillars of around. So what does self-talk look like in a pre-performance routine or pre-shot routine? Excuse me. What does self-talk look like maybe a post-shot routine? What does self-talk look like in between shots? So when we're walking from point A to point B and we really don't want to be so intensely focused on the game in that point in time, what do we want it to look like there? So we start to break up, make the containers maybe a little bit smaller, and then offer a little bit of structure to say, great, here's how we can use it here. And then you can use the app or the analyzer piece to then check that and see, did that really change today? Am I saying different things? Whatever it may be.
I think it's a brilliant idea. I'm excited to see it come to fruition and see what data, feedback, and education you collect to keep making it even better. Super neat.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It'll be evolving and it'll change, I'm sure, in a million different ways, but that's why it's so important to get it on golfers and then get their feedback. I mean, it's made for them. So without that insight, it can't evolve in its appropriate way.
Yeah, and I'll put all the information for Inner Loop in the show notes. We're going to shift gears here, though always related. One element of our identity, and my audience has heard me talk about this numerous times, is, of course, our self-talk. When you have a client whose entire identity is built on achievement, winning, results, where do you begin in helping them unlearn or detach from that to free themselves up for more presence and enjoyment in their processes?
Oh, yeah. Great question. A real question, right? I mean, I feel like this is majority of folks that I come into contact with grapple with this. I think for starters, let's bring attention and let's bring awareness to what's already there. So if we're already very results or outcome focused, or we're just so oriented in that direction, let's understand why to some degree. Like, what is it about results? What is it about a particular outcome? What's that mean? What's that say about you? Like, why do we care so much? Just getting an understanding of that sometimes can start to create enough awareness where we actually see, oh, man, I don't know if I like that as much when I think through it at a deeper level. With that, however, I would say, we also then want to, and which sometimes can be hard to do if we don't yet know it, or if it's not quite 100% real, but we want to start just like writing the other side of things. Like, let's write out that story in a different perspective, a different lane. Let's start working on a little cognitive flexibility to just see this from a different perspective. And with repetition, because at first we're probably not going to believe that, and it's going to feel phony perhaps, but with time, as we bring more awareness to one, that can allow us to help loosen that grasp. And then we start to lean in and really write and really just get connected with what we'd like to be real, what we'd like to be the norm. I think with time, we loosen up grip on one and tighten up grip on the other. I just think it takes the repetitions. It takes the practice. It takes actually doing it to make that shift happen.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Like, you use the word stories. I talk a lot and coach around the stories we tell ourselves, which obviously are constructed of the words we use to speak about ourselves. And those stories are so powerful. And I like what you alluded to. You've got to interrupt the story, understand where did it come from? Why is it here? And I like to go much deeper, just like you do. Like, how is it helping you? How's it hurting you? Yeah. Where did it come from? And get there, and then do the necessary work to kind of break that story down into its constituent elements, parts, chapters, if you will, and then reconstruct that story into something that is aligned with who you are capable of becoming, or whatever the next best version of yourself looks and feels like.
Yeah, no, I think you're right on the money there. And through that process that you talked about, I think we start to realize, my goodness, like, this story that's been running the show, I don't even feel like I'm writing it. Like, how has this story even come to be, right? And we start to realize, my goodness, I think I actually want to take that pen back in my hand. I want to have a little more of a say here in this. And I think it's an exciting time. Like, that's an inspiring time. It just puts us back in control to some degree.
Yeah. So these stories, obviously, they're not at first tangible, malleable. Oftentimes they're unconscious, below our awareness. Sure. Understanding very well that we're all plagued by these unconscious patterns, these invisible forms of sabotage. In your work, golf and otherwise, helping so many individuals at the highest levels, what are some of the most common invisible patterns of sabotage you see to an athlete or entrepreneur's performance?
Oh, wow. Great question. One that probably jumps up off the top of my mind to start is the fear of success. We hear so often, like, fear of failure, but I find it interesting, especially in people who have pushed hard, they've trained hard, they've maybe had success at certain points in time, but when they start to get a point of, oh my goodness, what happens if this actually becomes real? We've thought so long and like trying to get there, we never think about what it might feel like when we actually have it.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can be like a little overwhelming. I don't know if I want to deal with all of that. Do I even know how to deal with all of that? And almost counterintuitively, then we keep ourselves from it. We create new challenges, new obstacles. These subtle subconscious things come to the surface, and we say we don't know why they're happening, but deep down, we're probably the ones stirring them up and kind of sending that message to the top. So I would say that one's comes up quite frequently.
Yeah, I work a lot with that with my clients as well. And I think it's interesting, kind of dot connection moment to a point you shared earlier, where we can be incredibly clear on what we want, this next level of success, accomplishment, financially, healthily, wealthily, whatever it may be. Yet maybe we're not willing to give up X, Y, and Z to create not only the time, but the space, the energy to do what we know we need to do to get to that next level. And I like that you brought that up earlier. Most people completely overlook that aspect of the equation. We get really excited. Like, I want to achieve this. I want to be a scratch golfer. Sure. I want to be club champion. Okay, cool. Are you going to give up 4 more hours a week to practice, to put in the mental reps, the physical reps, the workouts, et cetera, to make it happen? I don't know. But if you're not willing to do what it's going to take, because you're not willing to sacrifice some of these comforts, you're going to have a really hard time getting there.
Yeah. And it's so fascinating hearing you mention this. I've heard this now, earlier today, I heard this message, and then I think it was about a week ago or so. And it was around the idea that, people envy the outcomes, or the outputs, but they don't necessarily envy the inputs, right? And along these lines, boy, this is what I'm after. Wouldn't life be great? But the trade-offs are the trade-offs, and those are real. And if you're not willing to embrace those and do the dance there, then It's going to be a hard time reaching that goal.
Have you come across too? I see this quite a bit of the people who are so addicted to doing the work that becomes their identity. And for example, I was talking to a client today, or a prospective client rather. He spends 10 to 12 hours a week practicing. In addition to playing 1.5 to 2 rounds, he's like a 9.5 handicap. He's been there for 2 or 3 years. In his group, he's known as the guy that's always putting in the work. And it's like, that's become his identity. He's the guy who's always putting in the work and not getting the results. And he's become so enmeshed in that, he doesn't believe he's worthy or capable of getting the results, which is no wonder he's struggling to actually get them, because his identity is so far away from the individual who does get the results, because the work he does, hitting a bucket of balls every day, it's comfortable, it's familiar, it's easy at this point, which makes him feel good about doing some type of work. It's just not the work he needs to get to the next level.
Yeah. Yeah, and now fascinating, right? It's like he's mastered that area of things. Yeah. And now, it's gotten you to a certain point, but now it's probably actually time to give it up a little bit, maybe lean into a little bit of a different flavor there that helps us or allows us to elevate up a little bit further. Yeah. That is interesting, because we do hear grind, work, keep going so much. It makes sense. And yet we don't want that to become the entire sense of who we are.
Yeah, really well said. So you have an athletic background. You played some basketball. You've mentioned, I've heard you mention before, you kind of, like me, I've candidly shared, I came into my own limitations, limiting beliefs, sabotaging behaviors that kept me from next level success. My journey was specific on the poker table for a while. You mentioned some of that in your own basketball career. Tell us a little more as you reflect, especially as you've gained so much knowledge and education since then. What was holding you back most from getting to that next level? And knowing what you know now, what would you either have done differently or tell that young Trevor?
Oh, yeah. Oh, great question. Throughout the high school years, and then certainly as I got into college, I was that player that, in practice, I could turn it up and I felt good, right? Because the stakes were low. There's no likes, there's no fans, there's no pressure. It doesn't really matter that much. But the moment it became real, it's like the confidence disappeared. The willingness to try certain things disappeared. The trust in myself and my own skill set, dissolved. And at the time, I had no awareness of that, quite frankly. I blamed it on the coach, or I blamed it on a bad break, or whatever the reason may have been. I didn't take enough ownership there, realistically. So if I could talk to that version of me again, or if I could go back in time, the first thing I would probably have done is try to find somebody like ourselves, a mental performance coach, to hire, because that would have been great. But without that being the case, it would have had to been a tough conversation with myself on, Trevor, you're important enough to trust yourself here. You're worth enough. You are valuable here. It came to a point where the team was so much more important than me that I didn't lean on me. I didn't trust me. I didn't feel like that was necessary. It was always more important to put the team first, which in a team sport can be great. Yeah. But as we're discussing earlier, everything needs boundaries. Everything needs limitations. Otherwise, the good is good, but they start to bleed into not so great. They limit us, they hold us back. So it'd be a tough come to Jesus conversation around that for sure. Yeah. And frankly, just a little more of like not caring quite so much. It's easy to care, especially when you pour so much time to things, but too much caring just, it gets in your way, slows you down, makes you double think things, second guess things. And, it limits our performance by a lot, unfortunately.
It does. I had a unique experience learning that the hard way, and I'll come back and connect that awesome vulnerability and story to something relatable for the audiences. I played my member guest, I guess at this point, 3-4 weeks ago, 101 degree fever, both days. So it's like, shouldn't have been there, frankly. But B, and I guess I should preface, this is 3 or 4 weeks from Trevor and I recording. I only had so much energy to focus on anything, and I had a very limited bandwidth to put forth into golf. But it was such a unique perspective in hindsight. I didn't have the energy to care about what was going on outside of golf, anything outside of that moment. And it gave me this unique window into a new depth of presence I had not quite tasted. And because frankly, there was probably a little voice in me that didn't even care about the outcome. I am sick as shit. I'm here for my team member. Of course I want to play well, but it's like, it is what it is. This is how I feel. So it was a really unique blend of being carefree despite caring very much to hit that sweet spot, ultimately the flow state.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Right. I mean, what a great balance.
Yeah, it was weird.
A great ratio combination. Maybe not the ideal way that we'd like to get there. We don't want to have to be sick every time.
Yeah, don't recommend it.
But when it works, and we can celebrate that.
Yeah. So now bringing back that example, which I appreciate you sharing. You're tearing it up in practice, but stakes are low. There's no pressure, no spotlight, no eyeballs. You and I both know, as well as everybody listening, many people struggle. They're scratch golfers on the range. They can hit every single shot. You want a high draw, a high fade, a low cut, blah, blah, blah. They top their first tee shot on the opening tee. They shank every shot when they're playing with people, especially strangers or people who they perceive as better golfers. For the person listening who struggles to transfer their range game to the course, what do you share with them in terms of where to begin addressing that to bring that same confidence and execution to the course?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, it's a great question. Frankly, it's one that I probably chew on frequently because I think the answer kind of evolves. But what I've been sitting with recently, and what's kind of made sense as of late, is it's to some degree coming back to a conversation on, well, what's bigger than the mistake? Like what's bigger than what could happen in a negative sense? Okay, I'm scared to go and play this certain way because I don't want to embarrass myself. I don't want to let down the team. I don't want to let down my playing partner. Whatever it is. Okay, fine. I like to step back, and this is when it kind of gets outside the sport, but it gets more fundamental, like who we are, what are we about, like what matters to us, what are the biggest influences in my life, and if I can take a step back and see some of those, well, those actually become a lot stronger and a lot more powerful than the could happen or the potential consequence. So, more importantly than maybe making a mistake or what coach is going to say to me, I'm somebody that I like to push my boundaries. I like to challenge myself. And if I can center in on that style of thinking a little bit more than the potential consequence if I do, then I think good things start to happen. Our relationship starts to change just a little bit. With a lot of players that I work with, faith is very big for them. The religion, perhaps. Well, okay, if we're facing certain situations where we alone don't feel like we can handle it, can we take a step back and maybe lean into that? Let's connect with something that's actually a little more powerful than all of this and trust that. And oftentimes I feel like, a little more freedom comes out of that. A little more ability to kind of just be flexible, move, trust ourselves, whatever it may be.
Really well said. What do you feel most golfers get wrong about mental toughness?
What I think most golfers get wrong about mental toughness is that it's supposed to develop in like a week. I get this a lot. All right, so how soon are we going to start seeing results or changes? And it's like, well, that's a marvelous question. It depends what life throws us. It depends how intimately you work with this. It depends kind of maybe how deeply programmed we are in a certain way. I get it. We want to drop scores fast, and that makes sense. But we didn't become this way in a week. We didn't become this way in a day. We've been working our whole life on this version of ourselves. So it's going to take a little time to rewire things, if you will.
Yeah, again, I come back to and draw upon my nutrition coaching background and career. I was like, you didn't gain those 50 pounds of unnecessary body fat in a week. Why do you expect to lose them in a week?
Right. No, it's a very valuable question to ask. I think it helps to reframe a lot.
How do you define mental toughness? How do you help an athlete or entrepreneur or any individual you work with begin to not only define it for them, but then cultivate it, strengthen it?
Oh man, wonderful question. To me, mental toughness is really having that ability to be present with ourselves, even in the midst of whatever challenge, adversity, friction we're facing, and have enough awareness to, maybe tap into a few of those voices and say, yes, I hear my legs screaming at me here. I'm cold, I'm tired, whatever it is. But I also understand this is why I'm doing it. This is what's important. Here's what the opportunity is here. And being able to, be in the middle of the storm, if you will, connect with that and say, no, I'm going to lean in. I'm going to trust it. I'm going to keep going. To me, that's remarkable mental toughness for sure. Yeah. Now, how somebody goes about starting to develop that is, I'm a big believer in do hard things. Like put yourself in the situations where you're challenged, where you're a little scared, within reason, of course, but a little intimidated. And as we greet those moments, and sometimes we succeed, sometimes we make our way through them in the ideal fashion, and maybe sometimes it doesn't play out as great. But the more we show up, the more we give those opportunities, there's proof. The more tough
Bingo.
moments I put myself in and I come out on the other side okay, then fantastic. But simultaneously through that process, I think we understand at a deeper level, damn, I got a lot more strength than I thought. I got a lot more power here, a lot more input, a lot more influence in this situation than maybe I thought beforehand because I've done it. And if that's the case, why can't I do it now? And I think, sticking with that for a while starts to change our outlook a pretty decent amount.
One of the themes that we've been alluding to without actually ever saying the word, and maybe it's been sprinkled in there a couple of times, is just the evolution of building confidence. Building an identity rooted in confident. I've done this before. I belong. I deserve to be here. I'm capable of doing it on the range, on the course. How does self-talk play a role in cultivating and maintaining confidence, especially after a mistake or a poor outcome?
Well, I mean, I think it's massive, frankly, right? In strengthening and creating confidence, but also in tearing it down. I mean, our words, they are good at that. I think if I'm remembering correctly, even since Alfred Bandura with our kind of our ways to self-efficacy, I want to say verbal persuasion was pretty close at the top of the list there. So, I mean, we've known through the research, the words we say do matter. They do influence. I think there is, though, a process of trusting that because also, like when we first say it, we might not believe it. Right? Never done this before. That's not true. How do I even know that I can make it through this moment or whatever it may be? But the more opportunities we have to say it, the more repetitions that come up, the more times that we prove to ourselves that no, that was legit. Actually, I do have what it takes.
Yeah.
I think that confidence starts to, become just a little more rooted in like realism, right? It's like, it's not built on sand. It's built on something concrete because here's the moments, here's the proof, here's the times that I've said it, I've done it. And now it's a little easier to believe, to lean into, or whatever you want to say.
Yeah, really well said again. And this probably isn't what everybody wants to hear, but there's a need for repetition and time. Seeking shortcuts and band-aids only leads to more challenge and a greater uphill battle. The best of the best understand this. They're patient, they're methodical, they fall in love with the monotony of routines and processes designed to push them out of their comfort zone just enough to get the stimulus they need to grow and accelerate their results.
Absolutely. I mean, to have the wisdom, frankly, is probably the word I would throw in there, to be able to see things in that way. Again, takes time to nurture and to nourish that and to develop that. But the more we embrace it, whether we're talking our sport or just life as a whole, I mean, think about relationships. They take time, our careers, whatever it may be. The more we can embrace that, I mean, good things happen, I think, for sure.
How do you help somebody, like something I always come back to in my own reflection and then working through with clients is like the element of being kind, compassionate, or offering ourselves grace. I admit that I am fully in the woo-woo. If it works, I'm all for it. So I tell myself daily, like, I love you, Paul. I'm proud of you, Paul. Like, how do you start to bridge the gap from that client who feels, talking to myself, is a little fucking uncomfortable, to inviting in, feeling a little more familiar and comfortable being kind to themselves when all they have ever known is just berating themselves like a jackass?
Yeah, I'd say a lot of us are probably in that boat, frankly.
Yeah.
I almost say, if it's difficult to do other ourselves, then fine. Let's start with others. Let's start with other people in our life. Let's start bringing that energy to those in our immediate circle. Let's start bringing that energy to maybe the random stranger we pass in the store, at the clerk at the grocery store or the market, whatever it may be. And I find that we just got to start working that muscle in some way, some form. Now, that doesn't mean it's obviously automatically going to switch over because we think a lot more about ourselves, or the thoughts about ourselves are more complex than perhaps the folks at the grocery store. But nonetheless, the muscle gets worked, it gets loose, it gets lubricated. And then maybe we start small. Maybe we find the most, minimum viable dose. That yes, that's going to
Yeah.
bring a little love to myself, but it almost doesn't even feel like it. Great, let's start there, and from that point, let's build up. Let's flex that muscle. I'm a massive fan of love and kindness meditations or meditations.
Yeah.
But just the name alone, I know throws a lot of people off. So I don't always bring it into the mix. But if they're open, that is by far a route that I really, really appreciate and lean into.
I love that answer, like starting with somebody else. Because we've all heard the cliche, like you wouldn't talk to your best friend, your spouse, or your child like that. And that's an easy, low-hanging fruit to like really audit how you're speaking to yourself. And I know my parents will relate. I've got a 1-year-old or soon to be 1-year-old, and just I'm very mindful of how I speak to him. I speak around him, even though he's so young. And something for me is begin to use him, just like you said, is continuing to pour that love, that kindness into him. And I caught this real cool candid photo of him looking at me, like he's literally below me in the picture. So it's like the metaphorical and literal representation of him looking up to me. And just seeing that daily too helps me remember that he's always watching, he's always listening. And for those of you listening with kids, loved ones, and just like Trevor recommended, finding those people in your life you would never talk to like that and pouring that kindness, love, and compassion into them does make it easier to do to yourself or for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I love that story about your little guy there. That's fantastic.
Oh, he's been the greatest teacher ever. Greatest teacher.
So I've heard.
Yeah.
They say life is the greatest guru. Well, no, I think babies might actually be like the absolute best at that.
I think
they
so.
take the cake. Yeah.
So picture this, Trevor. 18-hole, beautiful golf course. Maybe it's in Hawaii. Maybe it's in Texas, your choice. Centrally located on that golf course is a massive billboard, viewable from all 18 tee boxes. You have the opportunity to put a singular message on that billboard for all golfers and players to see. What are you writing on that billboard?
Really, really good question. There's two thoughts that are coming to mind, but I think I'll go with the first one. I worked with this gentleman this a handful of months ago, and we were talking about a certain tournament that he had played maybe a season before or something along these lines, and he shared something that his mom told him then when she was out there. I think she was caddying for him or something along these lines, and it was so simple. It was, "It's okay." And like when he first said it, I was like, well, what exactly is like, what do we mean there? But then as he expanded on it, he's like, you know what? It's okay if this doesn't go perfect. It's okay if I miss this shot. It's going to hurt. Yes, but life goes on. It's okay. My family's still here. And it just, the way it widens perspective to some degree. And I want to highlight that it doesn't mean we don't care. We can still very much care. Yeah. And it's okay. And I just felt like that. And it's what really resonated with him. And it did resonate with myself as well. Like a little bit of that pressure comes off all of a sudden. My back's not as up against the wall as maybe it once was. And when that's the case, I mean, we're looser, we're freer, we can breathe, and we tend to play our best, I think. So it's okay. Might go up there on the billboard.
I've asked this question dozens of times now, and I'm always just fascinated with the incredible answers I receive. I love that. Like for me too, it really embodies nothing is ever as good or as bad as it seems. That's okay. You're going to get through it. You're alive. You're here. You're fucking golfing. Enjoy it. Be grateful. Like so powerful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, this has been a delight. I am so glad that we connected. I appreciate you so much for joining us. Where can our listeners go to learn more about you, Interloop, and about the opportunity to work directly with you?
Absolutely. So best places to check out anything would be Instagram. That's kind of the main social media that I leverage.
And you're fired up on Instagram. You're fired up on Instagram.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's too fun, frankly. At Mindset Coach Trev. That's the handle there. And please, folks that come check out my page, shoot me a DM. I love, somebody said once, it's social media, so be social. And I really like that. It's like, let's have conversations. Let's talk. Like, why else do we have this tool that connects us in such a profound way? So Instagram would be one. Otherwise, personal website is mindsetcoachtrev.com. Pretty straightforward. There is everything about how my coaching offerings, services, background, history, etc. And then if folks want to test out Interloop, it is just interloopsports.com. And it is free as of now, but that will be changing by about January as the PGA show arrives and we start to make things a little more official and get out of the beta mode. So Instagram, websites, those will be the main places.
And those will all be linked in the show notes. Trevor, thank you so much for a phenomenal conversation.
Thank you, Paul, for having me, man. I appreciate it a bunch.
You bet. And for those of you listening, thank you. We sincerely appreciate you tuning in. There was such an abundance of value, insights, and tangible takeaways from this conversation with Trevor. So do yourself a favor. Go back and listen. Listen twice, 3 times. Take notes. And most importantly, take action on what it is you have heard and learned. And then go share it with a friend, a fellow golfer, entrepreneur, or high performer who's struggling with their self-talk, lacking confidence, and deserves to get out of their own way and achieve their biggest goals. And if you haven't done so already, it takes 30 seconds to leave a genuine rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to today's conversation. Thank you again for listening. Have a tremendous rest of your day. Hit them straight this weekend, and we'll catch you in the next episode.